focus of right now. Wilder, Fury 2, here we go.
News! Most of you guys have heard already that the IBF mandated title fight between Anthony Joshua, the unified champion, and Kubrat Pulev, the challenger, is official. It is set to be going down in June at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, which can host upwards of 70,000 screaming Brits, 70,000 screaming boxing fans. For Anthony Joshua, this is going to be a return to his home soil, and this fight was anticipated, thus there are no surprises here. We all know that the IBF doesn't dick around when it comes to their mandates, their mandatories. So now we're tasked with assessing Kubrat Pulev as an opponent for Anthony Joshua. What's the general overview of this guy, and how should we look at him? Well, at minimum, what we can say is that he's not a high-profile guy, at least not for Anthony Joshua. For Anthony Joshua, the feeling is there are bigger fish to fry. Namely, Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury, the winner of their rubber match. So for Anthony Joshua, this isn't really a high-profile guy, albeit a high-level boxer, because that's what Kubrat Pulev is.
What he has been.
This guy's been around since 2009, and he's only ever lost one fight. That fight being the fight with Vladimir Klitschko when he challenged him for his world titles. That aside, Kubrat Pulev, he's been around for the last, 9 or 10 years, and he hasn't shied away from the party, the heavyweight scene. This guy, he's no wallflower, you understand?
Or he hasn't been.
What I mean by wallflower, well, this guy's been very much a part of the heavyweight scene the last couple of years. He's fought some familiar names, familiar, assuming you've been keeping up with the division the last couple of years. On his resume, you'll find the name of Tony Thompson. That's the same Tony Thompson that Luis Ortiz fought 3 years after Kubrat Pulev beat him. On Kubrat Pulev's resume, you'll find the name of Derek Chisora. He beat in 2016 by way of a points decision. He gave Alexander Ustinov his first professional loss.
2012.
He beat Alexander Dimitrenko before a lot of guys beat Alexander Dimitrenko years ago.
Also in 2012.
In more recent years, we saw Kubrat Pulev dominate Tyson Fury's cousin, Hughie Fury, and Kubrat's native Sofia, Bulgaria. We saw Kubrat Pulev cross over to the top-ranked side of things and stop Bogdan Dinu in what was his top-ranked debut. And what Kubrat Pulev's resume encompasses, what it characterizes, is that he's definitely a cut above a certain kind of fighter, that he himself is a top 10 guy. For context, do realize that guys like Jarrell Miller, guys like Adam Kownacki, they've yet to face someone as formidable, someone as solid an opponent as a Kubrat Pulev.
Yeah, seriously.
If they were to lock horns with that guy, that would literally be the most solid name on their entire resume. The best assessment that one can make of Kubrat Pulev as an opponent option is that he's not a high-profile guy. He's not.
Nah.
He's not a high-profile guy, albeit a high-level guy. That he is. He is a credible opponent. He is a guy who's been around the block. He's been around since 2009, and he's only ever lost one fight, and that was to the top dog at the time. So he's definitely a credible scout in the greater scheme of things. These young undefeated fighters looking to make a name for themselves, well, they could do with a name like the name of Kubrat Pulev on their resume. Guys like Hrgovic, guys like Jarrell Miller, guys like Adam Kownacki.
Those guys.
Your Daniel Dubois, your Joe Joyce, your Tony Yoka, that Kubrat Pulev has already competed at a level that these other fighters are still working their way towards and trying to get to. In that way, yes, he is a credible scalp for a defending champion. Unless we forget, this is a necessary evil. This is an IBF mandated title defense for Anthony Joshua. It's either he fights this guy or he surrenders his belt. So what's he gonna do? I mean, it's not like he was gonna get to fight the winner of Wilder versus Fury 2 anyway. Wilder activated his rematch clause. We all know it. There's gonna be a third installment of their saga. So in the in-between time, Anthony Joshua might as well get his mandatories out of the way.
Yeah, why not?
Best assessment you can make of Kubrat Pulev is that he's not a high-profile guy, but he is a credible scalp if one can so collect it. Kubrat Pulev can show his level with the likes of a Huey Fury, and in that way, Anthony Joshua can show his level against the likes of a Kubrat Pulev. We'll talk about why that is. The takeaway is that while Kubrat Pulev isn't a top 5 guy, he is a top 10 guy. That, you know, you could do a lot worse than have this guy's name on your resume, because he's a cut above a Christian Hammer, a Daniel Martz, a Travis Kaufman, a Shondell Winters, an Alex Lapai. These kinds of guys that familiar faces like to keep busy with. That you could do a lot worse than fight Kubrat.
That's all I'm saying.
Now, as far as how the fight breaks down, well, yeah, Kubrat Pulev is a credible scalp.
Yeah.
He is a solid guy, one of the more solid guys at the weight.
Yeah.
However, for this particular task, I think he's lacking certain ingredients that he would need to secure the victory, because Kubrat Pulev is the older, smaller fighter in the fight. And what that denotes is that he's going to have to put that jab of his to use. He's going to have to employ that to try to get within range of Anthony Joshua to land some punches. For Kubrat Pulev, the left hand really is his signature punch. It's his most effective weapon.
Got a good jab.
But you'll excuse me for saying so that, given the dimensions of both the fighters, I don't favor Kubrat Pulev to win the jabbing contest with Anthony Joshua, because Anthony Joshua can be both assertive with that jab when he gets on that front foot and comes forward.
He could be defensive.
He can also use that jab as a deterrent while he's on his bike, circling away from an opponent, setting him up to walk into punches. He can keep a guy out with it, or he can work his way in with it. And him being the naturally bigger, more athletic fighter, really don't think Kubrat's jab is going to be as effective with Anthony Joshua as it is with some others like Huey Fury. You know, this goes back to what I said before, that Kubrat Pulev can show his level against the likes of a Huey Fury in all the ways that Anthony Joshua can show his level against the likes of a Kubrat Pulev. It's all relative, folks. Kubrat's a solid guy, no doubt about it, but I do think that in this fight, Anthony Joshua has several advantages, and I think for him, this is going to be a return to being a knockout puncher. Because lest we forget, most of Anthony Joshua's victories, most of his fights, have ended by way of knockout. In many ways, he's killing 2 birds with 1 stone here, because he will be fulfilling his obligations as a reigning unified champion, but just as well, this fight could service as a confidence-building fight for Anthony Joshua, because in his previous fight with Andy Ruiz, he had to be careful, he had to be cautious to not make the same mistakes that he did in the first fight. That if you can win the fight comfortably by fighting behind your jab and fighting on the balls of your feet, then do so. Don't take unnecessary risks. Here, there is a genuine opportunity to score a knockout, and that can build confidence in a fighter. I don't think Kubrat Pulev at this age, 38 years old, takes a punch as well as an Andy Ruiz. I think if Joshua lands the right hand on Pulev the way he did on Andy in the early goings of their second fight, Pulev won't be able to weather it as well as Andy did. Several times, I might add.
That kid takes a great punch.
I envision a lot of fencing in the early goings of this fight, maybe the first 2 to 3 rounds, both guys measuring the other man. Kubrat Pulev is very likely to fire short jabs in this contest, the kind of jabs that you're not really committing to, the kind of jabs that don't have bad intentions behind them. I don't expect Kubrat Pulev to get full extension on his jab, commit to it, as that could allow Anthony Joshua to lean to his left and let go of his right. You know, I think Kubrat's going to be careful in the early goings of this fight, because Anthony Joshua has a height advantage, he's got a reach advantage. He doesn't need to be deep in the pocket to hit this guy with hard shots, straight shots, and I think that when Anthony Joshua seals the deal against this guy, it's going to be with straight punches, it's going to be with big right hands. That's how I see this thing going, so it's a credible opponent for Anthony Joshua, it is, but make no mistake, I don't think Kubrat Pulev is going to finish this fight on his feet. I don't. I think he's going to get stopped. I think Anthony Joshua is going to go back to being a knockout artist, a knockout puncher in this mandated title defense. It's set to be going down at Tottenham Hotspur's Stadium, June 20th. So keep your eyes peeled for that. In other news, per a tweet from Steve Kim, so I'm hearing that WBC 168-pound titleist David Benavidez is still looking for a dance partner on April 18th. My understanding is that Caleb Truax is not taking the fight for whatever reason. Jose Benavidez Sr. says they are still preparing for that date while in Seattle. Now, essentially what this means is that both world champions at 168 are free.
Yeah.
Neither one has a dance partner.
Yeah.
Thus, there shouldn't be any issues making a fight between them. That is, unless one of them or both of them or their teams don't want the fight. You tell yourself that if David Benavidez ain't going to be fighting Caleb Truax, why doesn't he just fight Caleb Plant?
Yeah.
I mean, in an ideal world, that's how it would go down. Two undefeated world champions should be clawing at their faces for the chance to square off against the other to prove that they are the authority at 168 pounds. But we know that in boxing, things are seldom ideal. It goes back to what I told you before. The PBC's not just going to give away that fight. They're not. I had a passing thought that since Deontay Wilder has activated his rematch clause, and there is going to be a third installment of Wilder versus Fury, one decorative item they could use to make that undercard better than the last undercard would be to have these two guys fight each other, because for what it's worth, the Wilder versus Fury 2 undercard was shit.
It was shit.
Was shit.
Trash.
It really was one of the weaker, less engaging undercards for a pay-per-view I've seen in recent memory. And if there's going to be a third installment, if you're going to do the dance for the third time, ask the boxing community to pay for this for a third time. Why not decorate it with a unification match between two undefeated champions? I mean, surely that can help towards selling the card in its entirety. Try and understand that right now, there are actually people that are reversed to the rubber match. They don't want to see it. What they wanted to see was the winner of the fight move on to a unification match, an undisputed heavyweight title fight between the winner and Anthony Joshua. We already know who the winner is. The winner's Tyson Fury, and what people want to see now is Fury versus Joshua. But if the contract language and the legalese of it require a third installment, you're gonna have to sell it. And one way that you can help to sell it is by staging
A unification match.
super middleweight title fight unification match between your two champions. But with the PBC, that is a lot of wishful thinking, because we know how they operate, and we know that what they mean to do is to drag this out long enough that it can perhaps be built up into a stand-alone pay-per-view, a main event in and of itself. And given that Caleb doesn't have the biggest name, and neither does David, it could take a while for these guys to build themselves up to a point where you could justify staging a fight between them as a pay-per-view.
Yeah.
Know that the PBC is of this school of thought, and, if other outfits, other fighters were of this school of thought, we never would have got Ramirez versus Hooker.
Nope.
We never would have got Benavidez versus Vosdick.
Nope.
We never would have got those fights if those fighters and that outfit or those particular outfits were of the same school of thought as the PBC, that they don't want to let these two guys lock horns until they build up their names, when the only way you can build up their names is to have them fight each other. It's more of the same. I told you guys before, I'm not expecting these two guys to fight anytime soon, if at all. In other news involving the PBC, per Mike Kopinger and his sources, Andy Ruiz Jr.'s ring return is being planned for August. Two names being discussed for his opponent are Adam Kownacki, who fights Robert Helenius on Saturday on Fox. He wins, as expected. The other option under discussion for the former heavyweight champion is Chris Arreola. So let's get right down to brass tacks, folks. I'm not expecting Andy Ruiz to fight Adam Kownacki in August. I'm not. This goes back to what I told you guys before. I told you guys what they're going to do is they're going to have Andy fight Chris Arreola as a segue to an Adam Kownacki fight to build it up and allow the fans to cross-compare performances. That's what they're going to do. They're going to have this guy fight a common opponent with Adam to build up what could be Ruiz versus Kownacki. And I think that this might get mixed reviews because while an Adam Kownacki fight, assuming they're trying to build it up, and I think they are, while an Adam Kownacki fight is a titillating matchup, it really is. That fight with Andy Ruiz and Adam Kownacki has the potential to be a real Donnybrook, a real barn burner. While it has the potential to be those things, you've got to remember what Andy Ruiz is walking away from.
What?
He walked away from a Dillian White fight. He got 2 offers from that guy to fight either in the United Kingdom or the United States. And he turned both of those offers down. And it appears that he turned both of those offers down to fight Chris Arreola.
What?
39-year-old coming off a loss to Adam Kownacki. Chris Arreola.
What?
And that is who I think Andy Ruiz is going to fight in August. If not him, someone else. But what I'm not expecting is for him to go into the Adam Kownacki fight straight away. I'd be pleasantly surprised if he did. But I reiterate, that's not what I'm expecting. I'm expecting build-up. I'm expecting filler fights and marination, the calling card of the PBC. They have treated the situation between Andy, Dillian, and Adam as if Andy can't fight both of those guys. You understand? That you don't gotta turn down a Dillian White fight to fight Adam Kownacki. If Adam Kownacki already has a fight booked with Robert Helenius, there's nothing stopping Andy from taking on Dillian White, and if he wins the fight, he can still have that fight with Adam. It's still there on his side of the street. But Andy Ruiz turned that down, as if to say that you can't fight both of those guys in that sequence.
Why not?
Why not? What's stopping you? They ain't mutually exclusive. It's not either or. You could fight them both.
He could have.
I'll tell you, you'll certainly make a hell of a lot more money fighting Dillian White than you will fighting either Chris Arreola or Adam Kownacki.
That would have been a pay-per-view.
I reiterate, it's not an either-or situation. He could have fought Dillian White, and if he wins, Adam's still there. You can still have that fight. But he walked away from that. And I think that there's going to be some criticism levied towards him if it turns out that you walked away from Dillian White to keep busy with Chris Arreola? Well, that's a duck. That's a clear duck. I think the school of thought there is to orchestrate a card, a heavyweight fight, that would engage the Mexican-American fans here stateside, involving 2 very familiar Mexican-American fighters, Chris Arreola, Andy Ruiz. That, Chris Arreola has seen better days, but the Mexican-American fans are fiercely loyal to their fighters, and they'd show up for a fight like that. They would. So I get it. It's just that no matter what, it still reflects poorly on Andy because you walked away from a fight with a top 10 fighter to face a journeyman?
It's not a good look.